So we're going to talk about books. First thing I want to do, we'll get into super cool, but it's going to be so shockingly easy to write a book with super cool that most of the lesson is going to be in terms of the strategy for how to use the book and how to create a better book. But the actual writing of it, the difference between a better book and a not better book is like an extra 2 or 3 prompts. We've reached critical mass with the ability of AI to write at a world-class level. Now, if you are Hemingway or David Foster Wallace or Mark Manson or Kim Scott, or you have some particular voice and you're one of the greatest writers of our generation, then go ahead and aggressively get your voice. Okay. You'll probably have to do a lot of editing with AI. But if you're just a so-so to good writer, it's going to be able to match your writing pretty much is. Okay. So AI now is like 8.5, 9 out of 10 in terms of its ability to write well. Like I said, if you're a 10 out of 10 and you're literally one of the best writers on the planet, cool. You still should use AI for plotting and structure and first and second drafts. But that's kind of where it's at right now. Didn't save the word. Do it again, Michael. So imagine, has anyone lost an actual manuscript from like 10 years ago? That are like something happens with your computer dies and you're like, I lost it. That used to be a real thing. Like you actually lost it. Whereas now you're like, and then 20 minutes later, you have another book. It's kind of funny. That happens. It's crazy. I travel. I go from place to place. I've lived in, I don't know, like 12 different places since I was 18. I'd move about every 2 years. And the only thing that I really always carry with me are my journals. I have like 100 journals. So you have your main business, okay? And your main business is going to have marketing and it's going to have a funnel. And then you're going to have sales to increase your average order value. And then you're going to have some customer support and that's going to increase your lifetime value. You need to have an ascension model, something that's free, which could be social media, could be a newsletter, could be an ebook, could be a lead magnet, something like that. Then you need to have something that's like 7 to 40, then something around 200 to 500, and then something that's 5K plus. This is called an ascension model. Where a book comes into play is really 2 things. One is your free stuff. It can be a lead magnet, but it also increases the conversion rate of all of these things. Why? Because people don't trust you. They don't know who you are. And the main objections that people have is price relative to value, effort relative to value. Most people are lazy and want everything for free and instantly. And then 3, they don't trust you, product, company. Or 4, they don't trust themselves. They're not serious. They like the idea of it, but they don't really want to do it. These are the main trust things. And what a book does is it answers this objection automatically. If you're a best-selling author, they're going to trust you. They're going to trust the company. There's no ifs, ands, or buts around it. Okay. They're going to trust you. So what I recommend is, at the top of every website, you have your little header, right? And you're going to have your logo here. Then you're going to have a little CTA button here that's probably sticky. And then the question is, what are you going to have in these? One of them I recommend is download the book. Okay. So you can have that. I recommend this instead of an About Us section. And then the book funnel should basically be similar. There's a little hero section, the headline. You can have a testimonial section. Then you can have a benefits section. Then you can have a features section. Then you can have a chapter by chapter breakdown. It's table of contents in the center here. And then you can have about the author, like a little sales letter. And then at the bottom, it's this call to action to actually buy. What you want to do is you want to have your main product, then add a book funnel Then you want to become a bestseller. Then you want to go on a podcast, YouTube, blog, tour. Instead of just promoting the book, you're actually promoting the product. If you are a fiction author, the product you should probably be selling, unless you're making $1 million with your book, is ghostwriting, editing, book consulting, or one-on-one coaching if you're in spiritual self-help or coaching space. Even if you're in fiction, there is a way to monetize it, because the odds of your first book, making you a millionaire is probably low. You want to build a reputation, build authority. Okay. So this is the step-by-step. But the book that you're going to write is sort of relative to your product. Does that make sense? And there's two types of books in the nonfiction space. There's a big idea book, and there's a practical how-to book. Okay? So there's big idea and how-to. So for example, with AI, how-to would be AI for SMBs in 2026. Okay. So that would be a how-to book. And even better would be how to use AI to make more sales for your local business in 2026. So this would be good if you had what kind of company. So if I wrote this book, How to Use AI to Make More Sales for Your Local Business 2026, what should my company be? Probably using email. I don't think so. It'd probably be better if you're some kind of marketing where you can help people with automation. Monica, you're right that maybe retail stores would be a good customer, but the actual product you're selling should probably be something to do with AI automation for email. Does that make sense? Whereas a big idea book would be something like AI and communication. How AI will change the way commerce. Something like that. Not about a particular thing, but a one in the chat. You can see my screen. Okay. Jay, everyone else can see it. You probably just need to toggle over to the right. Okay. Does this make sense, guys? Big idea book versus how-to book. So big idea book, like the lean startup, right? The lean startup is still relevant today, even though the examples that they gave didn't have any AI. Blitz scaling, right? This is still relevant because it's basically once you have product market fit, go as fast as you possibly can and burn money to get more customers. Extreme ownership, Jocko Willing. If you're a leader, it's your fault. It's not everyone else's fault. Or why it's your fault? Blaming other people is not the answer, right? These are big idea concepts. In fact, the best big idea concepts, usually this would be more of a subtitle. And the title would be bold, the new talking or something. That's kind of curious, the new talking. AI and how AI will change the way commerce happens or something like that. Does that make sense? It's this kind of big concept. Whereas how-to is very tactical. They both can lead to sales and services, but generally speaking, big idea books usually lead to speaking gigs or consulting or coaching, whereas how-to books usually lead to services or software sales. Does that make sense? Everyone following? Okay. If it's fiction, basically your funnel is really going to be book and then audiobook upsell, and then probably a one-on-one with the author, and then maybe helping them with ghostwriting. That's kind of if it's fiction, that's generally your upsell path. And they buy the book, then they buy the audiobook, then they buy maybe a one-on-one with the author, and then ghostwrite. If you're more advanced, you could do merch, that kind of thing. But this is for fiction. For nonfiction, you generally want to sell something on the back end. Everyone following? And why am I telling you all this? So that we understand what we're doing. Remember your job. You are now the CEO. Because what does synthetic intelligence do? It does executive thinking. Then it does project management. And then it does actual work like an employee. What does AI do? AI is just like the individual employee. But if you've ever worked with an individual employee, you can't give an individual employee like, hey, I want to write a book about how AI is going to change the way we communicate. You can't give an employee something like that. You could maybe give a ghostwriter that and they're going to charge you $10,000 or $20,000, but you can't give an individual employee. It's too complex. There's a researcher, someone that comes up with a strategy, someone that does the first draft, then there's an editor, and then there's a typesetter. It's like there's too much to do that, and in publishing company, it's 5 or 6 people. Okay? So more than really. Then it's a graphic designer, then it's an audio engineer, then it's a voice actor. Like to do this 2 years ago would take like 10 different people. And now it takes one. So, and all of those individual 10 people are all those like individual AIs. But what Supercool does is it has all of those AIs in the background. You guys have heard of like Nano Banana, Suno, 11 Labs, or Claude Writing. These are like individual AIs that are good at a particular thing. That makes sense. So Supercool has access to all of those. Did you guys know that? That's how Supercool works. Okay. So Supercool. Yeah. Okay. Now you guys. Okay. So what Supercool does is it will take, you're the CEO. You say, I want a book. The reason why I'm giving you guys strategy is because that's essentially your job. Your job is basically CEO, and then AI will do 1 million things. Okay. And then it will give you its output. And then what does the CEO do with the output? The output is like, I need you to change blah, 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 blah. And then what does it do? It goes back and it does another million things. And then you get the output and you have to decide, is that good or I want to change something? And then it goes again. Does that make sense? So your job is basically decision making. What are we going to do? And did I get the thing that I want? What should I do? And then what should we improve with the output, which is just decision making. You're not really doing anything anymore. The reason I'm hammering on this strategy idea is because your discernment of decision making is basically your only job. I'm not going to get into this micro detail of how to do word for word writing because what it's going to give you is probably a 9 out of 10. I can give you my take on what I think is better writing, but it's all subjective. The best-selling nonfiction book 2 years ago was The Mountain Is You. Sold just a ridiculous amount. It's called The Mountain Is You. It's a black book. I hated it. I was like, this is bad. It's boring. It's kind of beginner. I've heard it a million times. It wasn't very good for me. And it sold 1 million copies. So that's fine. I didn't like it. No big deal. I still read it because I want to know what's going on in the publishing world. I read all the bestsellers no matter what. I wanted to get a sense for it. I didn't really learn anything. No big deal. The word for word is doesn't really matter anymore. The most important thing is thinking correctly. You decide what type of book am I going to write and how do I want to organize and why. That's what you do. The executive thinking, synthetic intelligence, will decide strategically how they're going to do this. How am I going to actually do what my client wants? It will start doing the project management. So it'll say, okay, well, first I need to come up with a title. Then I need to come up with a subtitle. Then I need to come up with the parts. Then I need to come up with the chapters. Then I need to come up with the main lesson of each chapter. Then I need to come up with the story hook in the beginning of every chapter. And then I need to come up with more evidence for the lesson of every chapter. Then I need to come up with a transition that makes sense to the next chapter. Then I need to write a first draft of the chapter. And then I need to make sure that it's in the style or voice that the CEO wanted me to write in. then it will write the entire book. And now you have a book and you say, okay, I like that. I don't like that. Change this, change that. Does that make sense? All of that I happen to know because I've written a lot of books and I've read a lot of books. So I'm fluent in this. Maybe you're not fluent in what I just said. The step by step of how to do this. Maybe you're not fluent. That's okay. Because super cool is fluent. And all you have to do is articulate what you want in a coherent way, and it will do the executive thinking. Then it will decide all of the steps that it needs to take, and then it will decide, okay, now I'm going to use a researcher to do all the research. Then I'm going to go on the internet and I'm going to search on Wikipedia. Oh, he wanted quotes from Julius Caesar. Let me go to this biography of Julius Caesar and pull out quotes from Julius Caesar. Okay, let me now make a decision on which quotes are best versus the other one. Okay, now I'm going to make a decision. Okay, now I want to, but all of this decision making, all of this processing is happening behind the scenes. Does that make sense? Everyone following? If it needs to call on a video editor, it will use a video editor. If it needs to create an image, it will create an image. If it needs to create an audio, it will create an audio. If it needs to write a script, it will write a script. If it needs to search the internet, it will search the internet. If it needs to read a book and pull something from a book, it will do that. So it's doing all of the things that you would in theory do if you knew what to do in order. Then it will do it in 15 minutes instead of 9 months. So that's where we're at. So here's how I recommend doing this. I just wrote a cold calling book. So like how to do cold call. And this is what I gave you in a Word document. So I gave table of contents, dial and deliver. That's pretty cool. The art of calling in the modern age, a practical guide to turning strangers into customers. And then I said in the prompt to make it a little bit funny. By a sales professional who's been hung up more times than you've had hot dinners. So you can tell just because I said make it a little funny, you can already feel the tone in the first sentence. There's kind of a cheeky thing. The introduction of a book, by the way, is always just selling why you should read the book. So this just said it out loud. Let me start with a confession. I hate cold calling. There, I said it. Strong voice. This is very colloquial, strong voice. I'm going to show you the prompt that I gave it so that you understand why it gave this style of voice. Told it to write in first person and kind of like a little cheeky. If you picked up this book expecting some zealot who wakes up every morning singing show tunes about dialing for dollars, you're going to be disappointed. The truth is, I spent the first 6 months of my sales career with a knot in my stomach every time I reached for the phone. This is strong writing. This is a good opening paragraph. This is legit. Anyways, this is the introduction, mindset. It's telling you what the book is going to be about. We're still in the introduction. Then it goes to chapter 2. Power, preparation, or while wiggling it is a terrible strategy. Look at this book. I'm not going to read it, but it has scripts. This is not a joke, guys. You guys can see my screen, right? I'm like infinite scrolling. Wow, you're going to write this book. Honestly, shocking. Let's go back and do what I did. This was my prompt. Write a 200-page business book about how to do cold call. Make it in first person. I definitely recommend this. You always want to tell it the tense. For you guys that are like 12 times bestsellers, you guys already know this, but tell it the tense. First person, second person, third person. Second person would be strange and is like a script, but whatever. First person or third person. Also tell it what omnipotence it has. Is it first person limited? Is it first person omnipotent because it's in the past? Is it first person present? Is it third person omnipotent limited? If you know what this means, it just means how much information does the narrator have access to? Can I get into everyone's brain? Can I only get into 3 characters' brains? Right? Like this kind of thing. And also, am I speaking like Holden Caulfield? Like I do this? Or is it more of a third person, like a historical fiction where, you know, there's kind of like this, the overarching narrator? Okay, so that's a third person. I said it should be professional, but slightly funny. Include scripts where appropriate and hypothetical stories. Very few bullet points. This is important. I always say this. I always tell it to do bullet points because sometimes it tries to condense itself. So I like more narrative style. Make it readable. It should be a bestseller. That's what I wrote. Now I have a playbook that has exactly the prompts that I use, but I don't always use it because I wanted you guys to see how it doesn't even have to be necessarily like the perfect prompt and it'll still do something cool. Okay. So it gave me a bunch of, it kind of shows its work. It'll say, I'm going to go onto these pages, blah, blah, blah. It's showing me all the steps that it does. Then I said, give me a .doc file formatted so it has around 200 pages, not 81. So it gave me a PDF, but it was like 8 by 11. So I said, reformulate it to a .doc. Make it formatable for Kindle. That was my second prompt. And that was it. This document was 2 prompts. The first prompt was, this is what I want. The second prompt was expand it, format it for Kindle, and make it into a .doc. You can tell it, I want a PDF, I want a document, I want a text file, I want to turn it into an audiobook. Turn the first chapter into an audio. So what is it going to do? It's going to go into its brain and it's going to decide what tool should I use. And then it will just start using the tool. Does that make sense? Randy, absolutely. So use this little button. I have an agency that does advanced marketing and helps people get ready to raise money, like pitch decks and that kind of thing. Investor websites, investor outreach. I've been working on this book for a while and I have a really detailed outline. And I wrote the first 6 chapters myself. I uploaded the first 6 chapters, the outline, and I said, hey, read the first 6 chapters to understand my voice and my style of writing, and then apply it to the rest of the chapters and finish the book. And it did it in one prompt. So this book that I've like been, feel like I didn't have time for like the last year and a half, it finished in one prompt. My passion is books, digital marketing and business. Everyone has a number, right? But you drop my retirement number on top of me, I'm basically full-time writing, just so you guys understand, right? I am pretty damn advanced when it comes to publishing industry, books, writing, ghostwriting, book funnels, fiction, nonfiction. We've had over 60 #1 Amazon bestsellers, our private clients this year already. Every single person that we've helped has been a #1 bestseller. I've worked with #1 bestsellers. I've had lunch with the biggest agents in the world in New York City and Manhattan. And I'm not saying that to brag. I have a very discerning writer brain. This is really big. If you're David Foster Wallace, you'll probably just use it for a first draft and rewrite every sentence. That's okay. Good for you. If you're going to change the form of how writing is done and people are going to study you in 50 years, you're going to use AI maybe for plotting, character development, but you're going to end up writing everything word for word. Totally understand. And that's fine. I have a dystopian sci-fi book that is like my baby, and it has a very aggressively strong voice. So I end up having to rewrite a lot of the AIs, but it's just because the cadence of my voice is so specific. But honestly, it might be able to match it in like 6 months from now. That's where we're at. It's honestly kind of shocking. Brian, you can use it. One thing that I do with BookDaddy, I use the outline wizard in BookDaddy a lot, and then I'll put the outline wizard here. If I do world building, there's a world building apps inside of BookDaddy, and then you upload them here and it'll just write the whole book. I don't really use the ghostwriter apps in BookDaddy anymore. I use super cool because instead of having to do multiple prompts, Ghostwriter is good for section by section or sometimes chapter by chapter if it's a shorter book. Super cool is crazy. This book is like 400 pages and I wrote it in 2 prompts. Day and I used Gemini to write my book and it did it well. It's because it's not doing chain prompting. And also, Dane, if you use like ChatGPT or Gemini, what it'll do is it often will forget. It'll hallucinate because it doesn't have a long enough memory to remember the context. So you'll be like, the first 5 chapters are great. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, but you already talked about that, or you're repeating yourself, or you didn't transition from this to this. Feels like you're writing a different book, especially with fiction. Fiction is anything to do with a mystery. The hardest thing for AI to do is fiction mystery because the clues, the subtlety of how you say, because every chapter is essentially just opening up a new question and closing off a question and opening up 2 or 3 more. That's essentially all a mystery is. Every chapter is just introduce 3 more questions, close 1, and then you start to have all these clues and questions, but you have to keep track of all of that. AI has a hard time with that. How do you verify that your AI is famous to genius? You verify it by reading it. One thing you could do is ask it to be an editor. It's a good question. How do you know if it's good? Unless you just have to read the whole thing. So I understand. Easy way to do it is like read it. But before you read it, ask it to be an editor and give you every problem that it has. Where are people going to be bored? What stories are redundant? What scripts could be improved? Then have it give you feedback, and then you go through that feedback and say, yeah, okay, but I actually disagree. I think this person's fine, or this is that, but these 3 points are good. And then you say, let's use your suggestion number 3, 5, 7, 10, 11, 12, and 21. The other ones don't do. Give me another draft. By the way, that's exactly what you would do. If you were the CEO and you hired someone to write the draft, then you hired an editor to look at it. The editor would say, hey, here's the 20 things that I think you should improve. And then your job is to go through those things and decide whether you want to improve them or not. Or you say, no, you don't understand. This is actually important. And then you do another draft. So this is how I would recommend it. Does that make sense?
Dial and Deliver, The Art of Cold Calling in the Modern Age, a practical guide to turning strangers into customers by a sales professional who's been hung up on more times than you've had hot dinners. Introduction: why I wrote this book and why you should read it. Let me start with a confession.
Can you hear that? Or am I just doing it to myself? Okay, so the prompt was create chapter 1 into an audiobook. Okay, so let's go back and look at what it did. I said, I'll convert the first chapter of your cold calling book into an audiobook. It's going to tell you what this chapter covers. I'll use text to speech with an engaging voice that matches the professional yet humorous tone of your book. So it first decided which voice to use. And if you have a specific voice, tell it what voice. I want it to be a British woman, whatever. Then it extracted chapter 1 from the larger document and started breaking it down into smaller bite-sized chunks because it couldn't do the whole 15 minutes all at once. It created 8 segments of chapter 1. Does that make sense? So 8 segments. And then it used an audio engineering software to splice the segments together. Why does it do that? If you guys have ever used text to speech, what it does is if it has too much data, it kind of hallucinate and it'll sound weird. Whereas if you get it like a 2 minute, 1 minute, 2 minute block, it usually doesn't make any sense. So it knows that if it gives it 15 minutes of audio, it's going to be jumbly, it's going to have some problems. So it strategically decided to break up the text into 8 different parts, make the audio for each individual part Then it decided, yeah, but that's not what Jonathon wants. He wants the whole chapter in one. So let me use a video or audio engineering software in the background. It has access to multiple. It chooses which one to use and then splices it together, then puts that file in one file for me. This is what it did. Do you understand what I mean? So the executive thinking is the decision, like, okay, what do I need to do? Let me divide this into sections and projects. Then it decides what softwares to use and how to use them. And then it does the individual work. And then it keeps on pushing it back to the project manager. It's like, that's good. Okay, move on. Okay, yeah, that's good. Now move on. Yep, that's good. Let's move on. And then eventually reports back to you, hey, I did this thing. And now I could say, no, I actually want it to be a woman. Okay, cool. Then it will do that. Does that make any sense? So if you understand conceptually what's happened, this is why it's kind of funny when we first started talking, because this software is like 4 weeks old. And when we started talking about this, people were like, what can it do? And it's like, well, it can do anything. Because we've given it access to all of these tools. So it has access to video generation, and it will even choose what LLM to use based on what you're asking it to do. If you ask it to create a hyper detailed academic thesis paper with like, MLM citations, it's going to use different LLMs and different AIs than it would if you asked it to write a romance novel. It will use a different one if you're asking it to write a business report or a nonfiction book. It's choosing consciously what tools to use and even what LLMs to use. It's all happening behind the scenes. And then you can look at it and you say, oh, okay, this is what it did. It's telling you what it did in each step. It's telling you what it's doing step by step. And then it gives you the subtasks. So every single document that it created, it'll give you in these tasks. So you can see all the individual MP3s and all the individual segment texts and all the individual pages. It'll give you everything. So it did all of these individual things. But then at the end of it, this is the complete book and this is the audio. Does that make sense? It's saying, here's your finished project. But here's all the different things that we did to create the project. So you have access to those files. You can just click view all files. Famous builds software, applications, and crypto projects. Okay. Super Cool can write code, but it's not writing code onto a server directly. You can ask Super Cool to write code, but then it's going to look like code. So then what do you do with that code? If you're a coder, great, go ahead. I'm not a coder. So what Famous does is you ask it to write code and actually builds the thing. It doesn't give you the code. It'll give you the thing done, right? So the way to think about the reason it's like, why did we build Super Cool and why did we build Famous? Because the same company owns both companies, right? It's because Super Cool does like front end and back end software development and app development, and Super Cool essentially does everything. And I use Super Cool to come up with my prompts for Famous. I make them work together. That's a little bit beyond the scope of this class, but does that make sense? Honestly, the biggest idea, the best way to think about this is test it. Just mess around.